viruses, surprise, surprise, guess who is a big boy in viruses? Corona. Corona is a major factor for poultry as well, right? And just to name, and that I'm going to use corona because of the actual outer layers of the viral cell of the corona, which make it more difficult to treat as compared to other viruses, okay? And then we have the mycotoxins from the fungi and the mold, and we will identify. So the mycotoxin is a subchemical of the fungi and the mold, and we're going to identify where you would find those things, how you remove them. Sorry, and of course, last one is parasites, which are the more physical aspects of these pathogens, right? So the parasite you could actually see, the others you don't really see. You don't see the bacteria, you don't see the virus, and you typically don't see the fungi and the mold unless you have the really colorful ones. You have like a brown mold or a black mold, and those will give you the mycotoxins. All right. The parasites, on the other hand, are more like your fleas and your ticks and those and your even you could even put vectors such as roaches in there, right? But roaches are not a parasite. It's more of a vector. But parasites would typically be, you know, the ones that hold on to the feathers and the skins of the animals, right? And then be a vector, meaning taking a pathogen such as what you are seeing there, the bacteria and the viruses, into the bloodstream of the bird, right? So causes of infectious disease. So let's move into it. So we have sites of infectious diseases, right? So very quickly we touch on to these. We have the food and the food storages. We have the water and water storage areas, and we have the housing areas. So we have little points on each one of them. In your food, you have your purchased grain and your storage grain. So you have your grain that you're going to get from somewhere else. Remember in the first slide, we mentioned, let me just go very quickly back to that first slide, prevention, which is your A, stopping the spread, which is your B, and preventing the infected animals from leaving the farm, which is your C. A being on the top arrow is your before farm. B, stopping the spread, is your in farm, and C, preventing, is your after farm. So let's go back to our slide that we're on right now. So your purchased grain is going to be from your, who can give me an answer as to where your purchased grain? Is it your A, your B, or your C? I'm seeing a lot of muted. Let's unmute and answer this question. Because this is a workshop, guys. I'm going to ask you all questions.
Your A.
Your A, excellent. Okay, fantastic, because that's your before farm. And what about someone else? What is your storage of your grain? Is that your A, your B, or your C? Anybody? Rajendra? Anybody else?
B.
Your B, correct. Excellent. Right? And your housing areas would also be your B. All right? So you want to really, but it is important, so important, guys, to identify the A and the B and the C. In fact, on one of the slides, in fact, on the first slide, I should have put the A and the B and the C because, you know, I related and I realized it makes a lot of sense there to do that. So you purchase your grain, you have to make sure that you clean that stuff. Storage of the grain, wherever you're going to store your grain, has to be clean, all right? The water and the storage areas, we're going to touch heavily on that, okay? So water and storage of the areas, water sources, water storage, treatment of the usage of water, right? And the housing areas and the enclosures, sorry, housing areas, which would be your coops and the areas where you would actually keep the animals, the enclosures, the beds, very importantly, guys, the beds, and the infirmary and the isolation areas, meaning where they are sick already, where you're gonna put them, okay? Let me just give me 1 second so I have all of those slides organized. So those are the sites of the infectious disease, and we're going to move on to the following slide. Guys, please make sure to put your questions on the platform, and we will have those questions answered. Once you put those questions, we'll answer them as soon as the actual presentation is completed, okay? So Mr. Sanchez, what slide are we on right now?
First slide is infectious disease. So I'm
Right.
gonna
Okay,
thank you
great.
so much, Mr. Back, for your wonderful explanation of the previous slides. It was really wonderful as usual. And I just want to touch a little bit on this because I think it's really important that we all understand what areas are risk areas, areas with high risk of getting these infectious diseases. And one of these areas that we like to put a lot of attention to is the food and the food storage area. As the same way as my colleague just mentioned before, we have to make sure that every time we buy grains, that we buy feed, and we have to, make sure that sometimes we
What?
just pay attention on how nutritious it is.
Correct. Just Mauro, just give me 1 second. If you could just come off of your video and leave the voice aspect on, the mic on. Right. Let's try that now
Okay,
because
okay, yeah, yeah. I was breaking up. I was breaking up.
all right. Let's try it again.
Explaining that it's important to recognize what areas inside our farm it's where these diseases and these infectious diseases can be found. And one of these areas that we consider high risk every time we go to visit a farm is the food storage area, because
Hold on.
some of these
We are losing you a little bit. Mauro, we are losing you a little bit.
hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not hearing you very clearly. We're using it a little bit. All right, that's okay. I will follow through. See if you can adjust. Maybe come in with the other line that you have. You can do that as well. Try for that one. All right. Um, because I'm not hearing you at all. Is anyone else hearing Mr. Sanchez?
Problems as well.
Okay, right. Okay. No problem. No, that's not a problem. All right. So guys, I will just follow through it. That's okay. So sites of the infectious diseases, as I mentioned to you all, the food and food storage, the water and water storages, and the housing areas. So we are now going to go a little bit more in depth with respect to those. Okay. Right. So the sites of the infectious disease, you have your food and your food storage areas. As I mentioned to you before on the previous slide, it is so important to identify what we are bringing into the farms, the A, the B, and the A and the B, sorry. So the feed or the purchased grain. New feed can carry a lot of harmful fungi and bacteria. Notice, please take note of the two different types of pathogens there. The grains are particularly susceptible to the contamination of the fungi. So what is happening there? Remember what I mentioned to you before. The fungi may show up as colored, but that's not always the case. Okay. So you have to be able to, one, find out where the people who you are buying it from are storing it. Okay, very importantly. And then of course, before you bring it into your area, you can do an isolated application of a recommended disinfectant, an agro disinfectant. And then three, the areas where you actually putting the grain must also be properly cleaned by a physical cleaning and a disinfection, because you don't want, again, in your B aspects, that you already have some form of a fungi or bacteria then mixing with the actual good grains that you have. All right. So we want to identify all of those things and then do the applications as such. Now, examples are mycotoxins from the fungi, which destroy the liver of the farm animal, is very, very deadly. No, very often, as just, at the end of the day, we are all learners. And in learning, we tend to sometimes skip over things. We may not put a lot of emphasis on certain things. And one of the things we don't put emphasis on are simple things such as being asymptomatic, meaning when you don't have symptoms. And that does not necessarily mean that you're not carrying a disease. You're not carrying a vector. You are not a vector, because if you carry a disease, you are a vector, right? And then everybody else could get sick in your farm. So we have to identify what it is we are doing. So the mycotoxins, we want to be able to remove those mycotoxins, right? And to be able to do so, we must be able to kill the fungi or eliminate the fungi. Again, second point, the vermin and the pests, such as rats, insects, pigeons, transmit pathogens to the feed and to the feeding areas as well. So guys, separate of the pathogens that you don't see are the parasites and the vermin, right? So the vermin, meaning like the rats, the insects, and the pigeons, don't be surprised. The pigeons, what they do, in fact, they might be worse than everybody else because they are flying from one area to the next, carrying the parasites, carrying the pathogens. Then they are going to defecate in the coop areas, right? Transfer their pathogens that they are having, that they have within them or on them when they shake off their feathers as well, and that's going to fall in your grain. How terrible is that? Because now you are thinking that you have already disinfected everything, you have already cleaned everything, so everything is supposed to be copacetic. However, everything is supposed to be great. However, this stupid pigeon gonna come and fly, take a crap, right? You have to pardon my words, because that's what they're gonna do, onto your feed. You are none the wiser, and then you're giving your feed to your poultry, right? So you want to avoid that. You want to avoid that at all costs. So what you have to do is put a barricade so the pigeons can't come through, okay? And again, monitor what is happening with your coop. Again, maintenance comes heavily into play, guys, because we have to keep an eye on for the things that are going in and out. Remember, the A part of the farm, the before farm, is a consistent thing. It's not because we made sure we didn't bring pathogens with the grain or with ourselves or even with the animal themselves that it's going to stop. No, you're always going to have some scenario whereby, you have a visitor to the farm, and a visitor could come in the form of a bird, a visitor could come in the form of an animal, a rat, for example, right? So all of these things, guys, have to pay attention to them. Solutions, getting to the third point here. Treat all new feed with food-safe disinfectants before storage and feeding. Clean all surfaces and feeding areas first. 3. Treat feeding beds, troughs with the same food-safe disinfectant before feed is administered. Now, we will get into the disinfection part afterwards in terms of how to treat, but these are the points that you want to really pay attention to in the farm. Very, very important. Treat all new feed with food-safe disinfectants. Now, disinfection, guys, is different from cleaning, and we will define those a little bit later on, all right? Again, clean all the surfaces, remove the physical aspects, and treat the feeding beds and the troughs with the same food-safe disinfectant before feed is administered, all right? Great. So we're moving on to the next one. Of course, troughs are your water troughs, right? Sites of the infectious disease, as we're moving on. Remember, the previous slide here was food, water, and housing. So we finished the food areas. We are now on to housing. Great. I see some questions coming in. Awesome. We will get to those. So, water and water storage areas. Guys, for those of you all who were not at the beginning, I really implore you to put your questions in on the platform, and we will answer them as soon as the slides are actually finished being explained. We will get into those questions and answers, okay? But I don't want you to wait until the end, because your train of thought, you may have forgotten it. And so as soon as you see the slide, and maybe if you really didn't grasp something, or if you wanted to ask me something that is additional that you you may have experience as a farm owner or a caretaker of the farm, then please do so. Drop it in and we will answer those questions for you. So moving back into the water and water storage areas, the water sources and water storage. Remember, using water from any polluted water areas, example rivers or ponds. I don't think we have too many, we don't have really lakes in Trinidad, but rivers and ponds and what just general water sources, sorry, not cleaning the water tanks frequently and with the right chemicals, and poor water storage practices, not separating water by purpose and usage. So let's touch on those 3 points, because guys, that might be just your first sub slide there, but you will be surprised as to how significant those points are. Okay, so let's touch on them again. Using water from polluted waterways. I'll give you a great example. We are dealing with an area right now that is not even for animal farms, and we are treating it. Okay, the water that they are using is to be applied on another area, but that is for grass, just basic grass that they want to use, right? Like lawn grass. But they are using water from a pond. The water that they've been using from the pond is being transferred via pump to the grass area. Do you know what it is doing for the grass area? It is killing the grass area. Why? Because that water from the pond has so many different forms of pathogens that when it goes onto the regular grass area, it is completely destroying it. And it is also adding a lot of parasites that are creating holes in the grass, right? And yeah, that is creating holes in the grass and damaging the under and upper surfaces of the grass. And you see the color discoloration, you see the discolorations of the grass as well. So, and that is just grass. Can you imagine what terrible things are being done to your poultry if you are using water from water sources that are not being treated? You are literally sending parasites and pathogens into the gut of your animals. And let me just pull this back to the previous slide where we talked about mycotoxins destroying the liver of the animals. Once the liver starts getting damaged, guys, that's it for your animal. There's no return, by the way. There's no return for your poultry if the liver starts getting damaged. And I forgot to mention that point when we were touching on the food grains. It is really going to do some heavy damage to your stock, your livestock, and you're going to lose them very, very quickly. Okay, so application to your grains and to your water systems is so important, guys. So important. All right. Mr. Sanchez, I just want to see if I can hear you again. I know you rejoined us. I'm not hearing him. Okay, all right, no problem. So we talked about the polluted waterways. So what we want to do, guys, first of all, identify where you're getting your water from. All right, identify where you want to get your water from. Do not use water from stagnant water. Do not do that. Your waterways must always have some form of water pump that is aerating the water itself. You need to get air into it. That's very, very important. If you can't get a water pump, use a centrifuge system whereby you are turning the water with some form of a propeller system so air gets into it, right? Once you have air into it, you can then immediately begin reducing the amount of bacteria that you actually have in that water, right? Then what you want to do is you want to have a clean storage area. Very, very often, what do? We are I think we're all guilty of it at some point, even in our homes, right? So think about it like this. If the next thing I'm going to tell you, you are guilty of in your home, can you imagine what you are doing to the animals, right? And I'm going to say it to you now. We are guilty of this. We get Wassa water. Wassa water goes into our tough tanks, those big tanks that we have outside. How often do you treat your water tanks with a form of a disinfectant or even a basic clean out? How often do you do that? Not often at all, if ever. So do you know what is happening there? If you open up your water tank now, guys, I promise you this. You're going to find a slime on the inner side of your water tank. And you are ingesting that slime every time you drink water. Every time you drink water, you're ingesting that slime. And that slime contains amoeba, fungi, different types of bacteria. And you are ingesting it. Can you imagine what you're doing to your animals? And then many of us, if we are lucky, because not everybody has big farm areas, if we are lucky, some of us create our own ponds. Because, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense to do that, right? A catchment area where you collect water. But guys, as I mentioned to you before, you want to have a centrifuge system. You want to have an aeration system, a water pump system, whereby you're getting that air into it and then you're going to pump it into your tank. Now, if you have already a pond area, you may think you don't need a tank, but you do need a tank to then do the applications to get rid of the issues such as that slime area, right? Or the bacteria and the fungi that you're not seeing that will exist in the water, even the algae, because the algae would be there as well, all right? And then you can bet your life you have some form of eutrophication in your pond area or areas where you're collecting the water that don't have the aeration system, all right? So that's very, very important. So we must clean the water tanks frequently and with the right chemicals. And then you have the poor water storage practices, not separating water by the purpose and the usage. So guys, I mean, really, let's think about this. What are we going to use the water for? Are we going to use the water to do cleaning? Are we going to use the water to feed or to hydrate our animals? Or are we going to use the water to apply onto the animals? Because we live in a tropical equatorial area. Animals need to be cool. Now, remember also, guys, think about it this way. When we are outside, right, we have skin, right? I mean, some of us a little bit hairy, but we're not that hairy, okay? To say that it's going to cover up our skin. When we go outside in Trinidad, how do we feel? Hot. We feel hot. The sun is hot. Now think about these poor animals having feathers. Can you imagine how difficult it is for them? And then we keep them. We're going to go into housing just now, but we keep them in enclosed areas with 100 different other poultry, whether it be chicken or duck or whatsoever, together, and they have feathers on top of them. Those poor guys, can you imagine how hot they must be feeling, right? So that's terrible. So we want to find systems also, and this is where the water comes in. You can also do, I don't want to call it a sprinkler system, but a misting system, whereby you run your water lines, right, above the coops, right? You have areas, and you could put little holes in them. And with a pressure system, what you have is mist coming out of those pipings. So it keeps the animals a bit cooler. And you don't do it all the time. You just do it, it's a regulated thing, all right? So we will get into that later on when we come to your farms and we do the second workshop, the on-site workshops. Because as you know, once we do this workshop, which is a free workshop for those of you all who have farms, once we are finished with this workshop and you want to see the applications and know how the product is being applied in your farms, we then do a second visit onto your farm once you have purchased the product to be used on the farm. All right, but we'll get to that later on, and that's actually not of importance right now. Importance is you understanding how to improve your systems in your farm, how to negate all of these parasites and the pathogens, and so having a better output in your farm. So the examples of the poor water storage, poor water applications is the protozoan that you would find in the water, coccidiosis, which is a waterborne pathogen, salmonella and E. coli, as we mentioned before, we find in the grain as well, and enterococcus, right? So you find here that the solution for these would be to utilize filters at the intake of raw water sources. So again, I mentioned to you, which is not even on the slide here, would be the aeration. And then two, a filter system. You can do a very simple filter system, guys, with rocks. You build a little cage, right? And you put different sizes of rocks in your cage, and then you run your water system through your filter system. A very simple filter system, okay? Even quality crocus bags can be part of it, but the crocus bags, they must have bigger holes in them, because then you will block the water and then you just have a backup. So you have to be smart about it. That's why we come to your areas as well, and we will show you what to do, okay? So solution, again, so you utilize the filters, as I said. You separate the drinking water from cleaning water. Cleaning water is for cleaning, guys. That's pretty straightforward, right? But a lot of people don't realize that. So your cleaning water is for removing excrement and dust particles, soil and that sort of stuff. Your drinking water is solely for drinking. Solely for drinking, okay? Just give me one second. Michelle, can you just speak 741-8033? I'm getting a call on the workshop. 741-3033. Right. So guys, so sorry about that again. So solution here again is to utilize the filters and the intake of raw water. Separate the drinking water from the cleaning water. Cover your water tanks. Cover your water tanks, because why? The same thing we mentioned with the pigeons before, or even frogs could get into your water tanks. The pigeons could defecate. They could bring disease. Your frogs could get into your water tanks as well, right? Simple fungi, bacteria, and algae. If you leave it open, you're going to have all those problems. And then finally, make sure to frequently clean and disinfect or sanitize the water systems. Now, I know you are saturated with the word sanitize. And we are not talking about those alcohol-based stuff that you've been hearing about or you've been using for COVID. No, we are talking about agro, biomedical, disinfectants, and sanitizers. Those quality products do not contain alcohol. They are non-toxic. They are biodegradable. All right? They are meant for your animals. They are meant for human usage. So they don't have those detrimental, damaging, and dangerous active ingredients. They are meant to uplift, improve the life of your livestock. Okay? So moving on to, so that was the water and water storage. We would have done the food and grain storage, and now we're going into the water quality checks.